Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Third Impact Anime. I am your humble merchant, Bill, and with me is a very special guest, Will.
Hello, the wise wolf Will, today.
Yes. Hopefully, you won't be going through a transformation as we're doing the recording, but who knows? We'll have to find out.
I'll try. Just keep that wheat to yourself.
Yes. Luckily, I have the wheat in the bag, and it's all tied up and bundled, so I think we'll be okay.
Perfect.
So, if you don't know what we're talking about, listener, we are talking about the 2008 through 2009 anime Spice and Wolf, which, as of this anime season, has gotten a new remake series called it's called like Spice and Wolf: A Wolf Meets a Wise Merchant, or something akin to that. Basically, a long light novel title.
Yes.
Yes. So we thought it'd be a great time to look back at the original Spice and Wolf anime. So, Will, I'm so excited for you to be back on the pod. I think the last time we had you on was the Berserk episode.
I think that is true, Bill. I'm very happy to be here for Spice and Wolf and also have the fabled Bill and Will special today.
Yes, or it could be Will squared, or the double William, however you like to take it.
Will X Will, but you have to pronounce the X, like Hunter X Hunter.
Okay. Well, I thought in Hunter x Hunter the X was silent.
Well, yes, but we're doing it the opposite. So Bill X Will.
Okay.
Just to keep anime fans on their toes.
Right. Just to throw them off a little bit. So, before we kind of get into Spice and Wolf itself, why don't we talk about how each of us kind of found Spice and Wolf and kind of how we got into the series as a whole?
Sure, I'll start. So some people may already know, but I was a rather late bloomer with anime. I did not start watching anime until I was in college. And at that point, it got to the point where to find shows I wanted to watch, I would just go to my anime list or Reddit and just look up best anime or top anime ever. And through there, it's how I discovered a lot of my early classics that I really like. And through searching through that, I found out about a little show called Spice and Wolf. I don't remember exactly how I watched it, but I remember that I did watch it, and I liked it so much that my first animazement I went to, I ended up picking up the complete series, the Anime Classics Blu-ray, that has both seasons and the OVAs in it.
Nice. Very nice. So, for me, Spice and Wolf got really popular during my time in high school. It was one of those sort of word-of-mouth shows. And it's kind of funny to think about because this is pre-Crunchyroll, pre-streaming. So everything was very much like word of mouth and someone finding a torrent of it and with fan subs and showing it to you either in your anime club at the time or you just hanging out. And or Funimation promoting it with their other 5 million trailers on their other DVDs at the time. And I think I got into Spice and Wolf through word of mouth, and people just thought it was really interesting because it kind of has a Western-like setting. It's focused on economics and a really strong dub, which we will probably get into a little bit later. So that's how I got into Spice and Wolf, and it's a show that's always stuck with me. Whereas some shows you just watch and you think that was fun, and then you forget about it. Spice and Wolf has always been one of those older shows that's always stuck in my memory.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's really memorable. I feel kind of the same way where anytime I'm talking about like my favorite shows, it just consistently pops up, and I feel like even in the online circles I'm in, it still feels like it's still like very relevant. Like even before the new show was announced, like people still were watching and talking about it as a beloved classic.
So, now that we've kind of got into how we found it, why don't we get into our kind of our behind the scenes with our cast and production staff. So, for our cast, we have our merchant, Craft Lawrence, or as he likes to go by as Lawrence. So for the Japanese, we have Jun Fukuyama, who was Lelouch in Code Geass. He's Joker in Persona 5, and Kuroro Sensei in Assassination Classroom. So he's a pretty big voice actor.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that he's like, still around and still doing really prominent roles too.
Yeah. And I was surprised because spoiler alert, audience, I've always preferred the dub, and so when I learned that he was the Japanese voice, I was like, oh, so they got some pretty big names.
Yep, I'm usually a sub-resident watcher, but this is like one of the few shows that I also have only ever seen the dub because it's just that good.
Yes, it is. So for the dub voice of Lawrence, we have J. Michael Tatum, who is Tenda Ida in My Hero Academia, and I think your favorite character, the Doctor from Steins Gate. Well, how do I pronounce his name, Will?
Rintaro. He goes by Okabe.
Okay, he just goes by Okabe?
First name Rintaro.
His first name is Rintaro.
He is my favorite dub voice actor, and I think a lot of that is because like Spice and Wolf and Steins Gate are two of my favorite anime ever, and I first watched them both like very close together. So it was also the first time I was like, hey, I recognize that voice actor with anime. And it just always stuck with me. And he also is, of course, like you just said, Ida in My Hero Academia, which is my favorite My Hero Academia character. So it all just comes around.
I will say, there's certain voice actors where as soon as I hear them, I know who they are. And it's like, oh, hey, Christopher Sabat, it's good to see you. Or hey,
right.
Hey, in video games, hey, Jennifer Hale. Nice to hear you. J. Michael Tatum, he has a very particular voice, but he seems to be able to blend into whatever character he's doing pretty well.
Oh yeah, he has a really good range, especially with his more recent stuff, I would say.
Oh yeah. So for Holo, the Wise Wolf, we have Ami Koshitatsu? Probably saying that completely wrong. But
Kashimizu?
Yeah. So her main roles of note are she is Sailor Jupiter in Sailor Moon Crystal, and she is Akame Shone in Birdie Wing, who is the assistant to the very perky golf heroine of Birdie Wing. And for the dub, we have Brina Palencia, who I primarily know as Chopper from One Piece, and she's also Sakura from Zombieland Saga. Will, why don't you tell us a bit of the production staff that worked on Spice and Wolf?
Yeah, so for the production, Spice and Wolf was directed by Takeo Takahashi, who was he is the chief director of the remake, I presume the Spice and Wolf remake.
Mm-hmm.
And he also was the executive producer on the Resident Evil Infinite Darkness, like those Resident Evil like CG animated movies and shows.
Have you ever watched any of those Resident Evil Netflix shows?
You would think with how much I love Resident Evil that I have, but the only one I watched was not the newest movie. It was like one of the shows. I watched one of them, and it was very okay. They always look really goofy, but I've not dived into the whole animated.
Oh, I bet, because knowing how they look, I bet it's either Polygon Pictures or Sola Digital Arts with their supposed expertise in CGI animation.
Mm-hmm. It's something, all right. I think if you're like really deep in the Resident Evil, you'll probably really like it. Otherwise, I don't know if there's that much there for you.
Gotcha.
The screenplay for Spice and Wolf was done by Naruhisha Arakawa, who did the series composition for Blue Seed, Kingdom, and was a scriptwriter on Dragon Ball. The music for this show, which is phenomenal, was done by Yushi Yoshino, who also did the Dot Hack series and Legend of the Twilight. The art direction was done by Toshimitsu Kohama, who was also art director for Yokai Watch and did some background art on Cowboy Bebop and The Big O. Now, between season 1 and season 2 of Spice and Wolf, there was a couple of changes with some of the staff. So the animation director for season 1 was Kazuya Kuroda, who was the chief animation director on Chrono Crusade and Princess Resurrection. And the season 2 animation director was Toshimitsu Kobayashi. And the character designers also changed between seasons. For season 1, it was Kazuya Kuroda, and in season 2, it was Toshimitsu Kobayashi again. Who Kobayashi you'll know as the animation director for a bunch of the Lupin specials. So any Lupin fans in chat, you'll know who that is. Yeah. And also animation director for the Persona 3 movies. So it has some Persona in there. That's nice.
I didn't know that Persona 3 had like 4 different movies.
Oh my god. I know P4 has an animation series. I didn't know P3 had anything. That's crazy.
So yeah, I'm assuming you haven't seen any of these Persona 3 movie specials.
I have not. As of now, I'm only a Persona 4 fan. I've yet to play the other games.
Oh no.
I know, I need to.
Well, don't worry. I didn't finish Persona 5, so you are just fine.
Yeah, don't tell Ryan that I'm still procrastinating on P5.
It's so long. It's so long, though.
I'm struggling to finish my Paper Mario 1000 Year Door playthrough, and I love that game. That game's not even that long.
Well, that's what happens when you become an adult, and you have to deal with adult responsibilities of, you have work makes you tired, you just want to zone out. You only have so much brain power in the day.
I am an adult. I have no time to roleplay as a teenager anymore.
No, I cannot stay up for 48 hours trying to beat this game in a weekend.
So, a little bit of background for Spice and Wolf. So, in its original form, Spice and Wolf is a light novel series by Isuna Hasekura that began in 2006 and is still ongoing to this time. The way I understand the light novels is that there are, I want to say, a little bit over 20. The main story of Spice and Wolf has concluded, but they're still releasing light novel volumes that are like little epilogue stories. So, for those who want to get the full story, light novels would probably be the way to go. However, there is also a manga adaptation that ran from 2008 to 2018. Now, the manga series does not cover everything that's included in the light novels. I've also been told that any of the content from season 2 of the anime is also not included in the manga adaptation, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I guess there's just a couple different ways you can choose to approach the story, which I think is interesting. The original anime adaptation, which we'll be discussing today, originally ran from 2008 to 2009 over 2 different seasons.
Yes. And if you are a light novel fan, Yen Press, who is the U.S. publisher of the Spice and Wolf light novels, have been pushing into the audiobook space by doing audiobook readings of their different light novel licenses they have, including Spice and Wolf, where they have either Brina Palencia or J. Michael Tatum read one of the books.
That is great. I wonder if they read each other's character lines or not. Is it one of them is all by J. Michael Tatum and he's reading Hollow's lines or something?
So okay. So I've listened to at least one of the audiobook novels, and it's a bit weird because initially they just had J. Michael Tatum read the whole book. And then, from what I've heard, it sounded like people wanted Brina Palencia to also be part of the reading. So they did a thing where J. Michael Tatum will read one half of the book, and Brina Palencia will read the other half.
Okay, I kind of like that.
I kind of get why, because maybe it's just easier to do that for recording sessions, but I wish it was more like they read their individual parts and one person was the overall narrator.
Yeah, that might be organized a little bit better, but...
Yeah. But I've heard good things, and I think it's really cool that Yen Press is doing audiobook versions of their light novels. I think that would get me to actually try and read more light novels if they're audiobook versions.
Yeah, it seems like even in an era where for the longest time people were clamoring for a season 3, there still was a pretty steady stream of Spice and Wolf content. Like, I know there's some DS games that were released in Japan as well. So kind of across a lot of different media, you could still get your Spice and Wolf fix.
Then skipping along, I sang the song to everyone. I look at the world through apple eyes and cut myself a slice of sunshine pie.
What is Spice and Wolf really about? Well, our story follows a young merchant by the name of Kraft Lawrence. One night he finds a young girl in his cart. He discovers she has wolf-like ears and a tail. She states that she is Holo the Wise Wolf, a deity/god who has kept the local town's wheat harvest plentiful and strong. But now, as time has progressed, the villagers have become less humble to the traditions, and she has decided that she wants to travel home back to the north with Lawrence's help. He accepts this proposal, and the series follows Lawrence and Holo's journey to the north as Lawrence tries to pursue financial gain, avoiding suspicion from the church or any outsiders about Holo's true identity, and the two of them kind of adapting to each other's perspectives about the world.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like when Lawrence and Holo are traveling, there's a lot of different moving parts for them trying to sneak around, but also trying to make coin while they can. So it kind of has almost like a dichotomy of different focuses the show is balancing, that I think it does a really good job at it.
Mm. Yeah, I think to kind of get into our discussion section, the strongest thing for me with the show is the dialogue.
Oh, yeah.
Because I have to give props to Funimation's, at the time, script adapter, who I think it was Eric Vale, who was also a dub actor. He did a really good job adapting it, because a main thing is with Spice and Wolf is while they are doing things, it can kind of be like a 2-act play of Lawrence and Holo discussing each other and teasing each other and flirting with each other and talking about their perspective on the world. And I think that's the secret spice of Spice and Wolf.
Yeah. It's like you even get a lot of scenes where it's literally just a closed-in room and they're just sitting and talking and like learning more about the world and learning about how they each kind of view it.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think really is really nice. It's almost like you have like a quick like huddle and they get to kind of talk things out and have some communication, which is cool. I like how the way a lot of times I view it is like Lawrence, this is going to be like D&D terms. Like Lawrence is like the higher intelligence character, but Holo is more of the higher wisdom character because he'll be teaching her a lot about the specific economic functions and what he's trying to do, but Holo is just so keen on like human nature and like when people are lying or deceiving him. So they really kind of balance each other out and they really kind of need each other to venture. Like even though Lawrence is like a relatively somewhat well-known within his company maybe of a merchant, and he's like been a merchant for a while, I still feel like he has a lot of like he's still kind of naive about a lot of things, and Holo kind of has to bring him in the check at times.
Yeah, I completely agree with the counterbalance because she is more adept about piercing through people's words and their meaning, uh, whereas he is more strong about the structure of the world and how the economics of the world, like when they're dealing with trades for weaponry or for wolf pelts or for spices. He's more keen to that. And so they can really kind of bounce off each other when it comes to these economic deals. One aspect that I also find really interesting is the because Holo is much older, she has a much more different perspective on the world. Like in the first season, at one point they come to a town where they see a church, and she says like it's so funny because uh, when I was younger they were basically nothing, and no one really paid attention to them, and now the church is this organization that has influence, which is something that she is not used to.
Right.
And I know you've also been watching Free Run Beyond Journey's End, and I was curious because both Spice and Wolf and Free Run have characters that have lived through a long period of time, uh, with Holo and with Free Run. If they have a kind of a similar kind of distant perspective about the world.
Oh yeah, that was something I was going to be bringing up later on, because I do feel like a lot of Freyren and what it does. I wouldn't want to say it got direct inspiration, but I do see like things that Spice and Wolf did that I'm like, oh, and when I'm watching Freyren, like exactly the point you just made about both protagonists kind of having that very similar like experience. But also just kind of the structure of the shows too, where they're very like journey travel based, and you really get to see like them experience these new things with them while they're traveling. I do think that there's a lot of similarity there. A lot of it is comical too, of just like some of the things that happen and how they react to how things have changed. The setting too, I think, is fantastic. Like the almost like medieval type, I guess, fantasy. I say fantasy, like there definitely is kind of like a god, almost magic type component, but it's so muted that besides like Hollow, of course, you don't really see it too much around the world.
Maybe that's one reason why the show was easier for people to get into, because it has a very Western setting.
Mm-hmm.
So it was something that maybe was more comfortable to someone that might have been new to anime at the time.
That's a good way to look at it, because it doesn't necessarily do a lot to really throw you in there. It feels very grounded.
Yeah, I guess the only difference is that Holo is much more flirtatious
This is true.
than Freerun, where she'll just try and wrap Lawrence kind of like around her little finger and want him to act a certain way. Like I think in certain sequences they'll show us what looks to be like a flashback, but it's really her perspective of how she wants him to react, and then he'll do the complete opposite, and just they kind of butt heads at times, because I think for him maybe because of his upbringing, he's always cautious about showing affection. He seems very he can be guarded about that, whereas Holo is much more expressive about that and wishes that he was.
Or he's just very oblivious to the whole thing because his mind is just so much sometimes on the coin.
That too.
Like, he can be very much a realist, which I think is really fun to see that dichotomy and the misfortunes it can bring them sometimes.
Right. And just her view on the world can at times cause a negative a negative outcome for them economically.
Like when she wants to buy all the apples.
Yeah, like she basically drives him to a major food debt with how much she just wants to eat the most finest and fanciest food around.
That was one of my favorite bits. Is like after the first arc, when Lawrence wakes up and he just has like a bill for like food and fur, and like that's how we knew that she was still around. I don't know how much we want to get into like plot spoilers or specific plot points.
No, we can definitely get into plot spoilers. The show is more than 15 years
Okay.
old, more than 10 years or 15 years old at this point. So, yeah. So if whatever plot points you want to talk about, go for it.
Okay, cool. But I think a lot of the flow and format of this, like, it definitely is, like, different arcs sometimes just have completely different tones, which I think works in a setting where they're kind of going to town and going to new areas. Like, the first arc in this show gets very much involved with Chloe and the church, like, trying to hunt down Holo. I'm sure that the light novels or source material has more about that, because in the anime, it's really only that first arc where, like, the church is really, like, a huge threat, like, in the foreground. And a lot of these side characters are really kind of only there for, like, their arc, like, the first arc, basically. And, like, they move on to the next town, it's, like, new characters, and there isn't too much reoccurring. And I'm sure that might happen later on in the light novels, but I think it makes it kind of interesting in a way that you kind of see all these seeds being planted. It kind of just makes me say, like, oh, I can see why people really wanted a season 3 for so long, to see where all these, like, different plot lines went to.
You know what's really interesting? So I've watched a first few episodes of the remake series that's out,
Okay.
and it is a retelling of that first story arc from the original anime, but there are differences. Like, Chloe is not there at all.
Oh. Okay.
Where he just hears about it from, I think, like, one of the local townspeople about them bringing in the money, and he meets the same merchant in the tavern that tells him about the deal of, like, there's this particular coin that I get you on the ground floor about. But Chloe is nowhere to be seen, which makes me wonder if she was an anime original character to bring in an extra layer, because one recurring thing throughout the Spice and Wolf series is that that romantic tension between Lawrence and Holo of will they, won't they, and other characters potentially being rivals. Like, Chloe is a rival to Holo potentially, or the same with the sheep herder girl
Nora.
Nora in the second arc, which she does not, who Holo does not like.
I love how Lawrence is like, hey, come on, just because she's a shepherd, you don't have to be so mean. And, like, he doesn't really get it at first.
And she's like, well, you just are really into like this petite damsel in distress women because it makes you feel masculine.
Right.
And she can really cut to the bone with Lawrence, because she has a very biting words with him at points.
There's a lot of moments in the show where, like, they get into, like, their conversations turn into arguments, but they still kind of come back around at the end, because, like, their bond just over the course of the show just gets stronger with everything they're going through.
Yeah, how do you feel about kind of, because the romantic element is another core tenet, or another core pillar of the show, is the romantic element between Holo and Lawrence.
Yeah, I feel like I think it's okay. I think it can work. I presume that, you know, over time with the source material, it probably gets there. Like, it gets up to that point is my presumption, because I feel like season 2, like the end of season 2 almost feels like a climax of that relationship, where, like, you know, Lawrence, like, specifically is, like, saying that, like, he's in love with Holo, or he loves her.
Mm.
So a lot of that to me feels like, I don't know what the production of season 2 looked like, if maybe they knew there wasn't going to be any more, but part of it feels like almost like a finality of that part. Like they're already like, okay, we love each other. Like Holo kind of hints at it, you know?
Yeah, I have a bit of a frustration with season 2. A little bit, because season 2's two main story arcs repeat the same. I feel like they repeat the same concepts over and over, back to back, where each arc is basically a decoration. Decoration. There we go. Of their feelings for each other, especially that first arc, where they meet kind of this young up and coming merchant who is selling sort of like this commodity that's being rarefied because of its unique design and its unique color, even though it's mostly fabricated. And it comes to a point where he makes a trade where he gets a bunch of money from this young merchant, and he gets to pay off Holo's debts, and then potentially declare to ask Holo to marry him.
Yeah, that like first half of season 2, I like the economic part, right? Of like manipulating a stock market. I think that was a lot of fun, but I do kind of agree that there was some kind of frustration with how they handled the Holo part of that arc. Like sometimes, sorry, what's up?
Sorry, I was gonna say, can you explain to me? Because at one point she gets really mad over a letter, and I was a bit lost about why she gets mad. I don't know if you remember that part.
Yeah, so this is after the part where Lawrence goes to talk to the alchemist lady, I forget her name, when he's asking about Yoitsu and like history of the region where Holo's from.
Mm-hmm.
And she, I think, tells Lawrence that like that region is, or that town that she's talking about is like gone or wiped out or something. But then like she sends a letter to Lawrence's inn, like the inn that he's at, to explain it, that like this whole like that like what happened to in Yoitsu, that like it's no longer there. But he, like, Lawrence knew but didn't tell Holo what he learned when he spoke with her, so that's why she was upset when she actually does learn to read and reads the letter, that she found out that that Lawrence was keeping this information from her about how her, like, the town that she knew of near her hometown might just be completely gone and wiped out. That there might not be anyone waiting for her when she goes back there, because she wants, of course, to reunite with her kind up there, but it's very possible, based on what the alchemist lady said, that everyone from there is just completely gone. And that's why she was upset.
Okay, so it's you didn't trust me to take this information well.
Mm-hmm. Because Lawrence, like, I wanted to tell you, but I just didn't know how. But his hesitation is what really got Holo mad, because, like, he kind of just held on to that.
Right. Speaking of the economics in that arc, I really love when Lawrence goes to the local merchant friend of his and says, like, hey, can you spread the rumor about me buying all I think it was Pyra. I think they call it Pyra.
The pyrite? The little rocks?
The pyrite, the rocks.
Yeah.
And he goes, like, I can't do that. And he goes, what do you mean you can't do that? It's really easy. You're getting a lot of money. You're gonna do well, like, excellently economically. So why won't you do this? And he basically goes into the speech of, like, you don't understand. You're a traveling merchant. I'm a local merchant that has a reputation. Mm-hmm. And if I do anything that soils my reputation, I'm ruined. So in the short term, yes, I am getting a financial gain, but this will hurt me more in the long term, because reputation is just as important as financial gain.
Right. I think that really highlights a lot about how Lawrence is still kind of new to the merchant game. Like, he's so much, like, he knows how to be like a traveling merchant, and he wants to open a shop one day, but then, you know, it's things like that he just does not think about, because he's just not at that step in his career, basically.
Right. And it can be hard for him. I wouldn't say he's a snake in the grass, like very cunning. Like
Mhm.
he can be very smart, but he can also be somewhat uh, not as ruthless as other people that he has to deal with.
I feel like he kind of puts the blinders on and sees exactly what goal he wants to hit without sometimes considering the consequences of the actions to get there.
Hmm. Right. Uh, like when I think he's talking in the first season when he's looking to buy the arms and all the weapons. He doesn't realize that I think it's a priest that is selling it, and he's using unfair weights to give him an
Oh,
advantage.
yeah.
And then Holo catches onto it and gives him a warning.
Oh, yeah. They're such a good duo together for, like, even just the merchant, like, side of everything, like the economic side, because she can just see when people are being deceitful, and it really helps Lawrence, like, catch on to that, too.
Yeah, and I have to give the show props because when you think of economics, you get afraid of like, oh no, this is going to be so intimidating. But the show's dialogue, and I think them reiterating what's happening makes it very clear to the viewer, like what's at stake, what's the cost of things, why are things a certain way. I never felt lost in the economics of everything.
Oh, yeah. And that's such a good benefit is because we, the audience, with Holo, get to learn from Lawrence, like, what he's doing and how everything works in this current, quote-unquote, modern era.
Right.
It's a really great framing device to teach everyone at the same time what exactly is happening or what he's trying to do.
Right. Like when he gets the armory and the weapons and he goes to the next town and everyone's acting weird around him. And then he learns, like, oh, the exposition, nope.
Expedition. I didn't think about
it.
The trip up north.
Yes, the trip up north where there was going to be a need for weapons and for armor, and that trip is canceled, and he has worthless goods. And him explaining to Holo just like why this is so bad, and now he has this debt that he has to deal with because he bought the goods from the priest on credit, not through financial means. And because it's on credit and it's gone bad, then it's basically he's stuck in a black hole. And they explain it very well to the audience about what exactly is happening and why Lawrence is in a sign of despair.
Oh yeah, and the good thing is that he also knows in that moment. Like he's not completely out of the loop or anything. Like he still can follow along with like the principles of the economics. But I do feel like a lot of maybe more so in season 1, but I feel like a lot of his ventures don't always plan out accordingly, and like Holo almost has to kind of get him out of the danger that he's in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I okay. Speaking of the ventures, most of them to me make financial sense, and it makes sense to me of why he as a character would do them. But the financial venture that he does in the second arc of season 2 really bugs me.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how I wanted to vocalize that, because part of me just feels like he's being told this idea by Eve about like, hey, if you just sell Holo, then we can use this to like buy like fur, I think, or something, and then sell the fur.
So I think the deal was like she is an unknown person and she looks of noble background. Eve, come from a noble background, and I can say that she is also from a noble background, and we can use that to get an in with the church, which then we can make a lot of money with this deal with the church. And my frustration with it is, like, Lawrence really isn't into this deal. He seems to be doing it because Holo wants him to. And I kind of wish he had more of the backbone to say, like, look, I know why you want me to do this deal because then I could get my own shop. but right now I'm happy what we're doing. I don't want to change it. Because if he just had a backbone and said no, and wasn't so wishy-washy with Holo, I think then they could have avoided that deal the whole time.
That's really the first moment where Lawrence kind of, I think, questions his life dream of being a merchant because of how much he's really liked traveling with Holo. And I think that, a season 1 Lawrence may have really been okay with that deal, but over time, all this time bonding with Holo and everything, the idea of losing her and not being able to travel with her anymore, even if it means achieving what he's always said he's wanted to do, still puts that dilemma in his mind. Like, for a story standpoint, I kind of like that in the sense of he's conflicted with what his motivations and goals are. But I do agree that, like, it seems like a lot of the deal is kind of like, hey, we're going to do this deal to make money, but we're going to lie to people to do it,
The other thing, too, is from a pacing perspective, I feel it's very rushed because they spent so much time on that first arc.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas in the second arc, they spend a lot of time like world building and about them hanging out in this inn and setting up Eve and the old man. And to me, it just feels that whole deal feels rushed, where they're quickly making the deal, and then the deal falls out, and then they have to resolve that very quickly because we only have so many episodes to go.
Yeah, I don't know how the light novel does it, but then, like, I think it was the second to last or the third to last episode where it's like, oh, the town's rioting now.
There's been a coup.
Yeah,
because the big crux of the city is there's a bunch of merchants outside the city waiting to sell their fox pelts or wolf pelts, and they're waiting on this 40-man council to make a decision. And it's a lot of setup for this arc where I'm just kind of like, we don't have time to do the setup of setting up who this council is and the conundrum with the town and setting up the barkeep and setting up Eve and setting up the old man who's running the bar. Running the inn. It's too much when you don't have the time.
Yeah, and I think they put more of the stock into the apex of Lawrence and Holo's relationship versus like the kind of the steps to get there, as it were. Like, right. It all, in the end, Holo and him are still back together and they're going to travel. Like, that adventure's over, but it did feel kind of messy and too many moving parts that they didn't really give a lot of time to flesh out, I think.
And I will say the one positive about that arc is you definitely see a change in their relationship where Lawrence is a lot more playful with Holo in that arc, where he's kind of doing these pretend proclamations to Holo in a playful manner, which is season 1 Lawrence would probably never do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought just like the character stuff between Holo and Lawrence is still very strong, but I find the financial part for that second story in season 2 not as strong.
Yeah, and part of me feels like that is just something that can happen when the show is really like the economic part and their like Lawrence and Holo's relationship part, and sometimes they're not always synced up in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
But you still get like one side really good or the other side really good.
Right, and I guess my other problem too is like it's the second story in that season 2 where it's a declaration of or declaring of their romantic feelings for each other, because it's the same thing in the first arc for season 2, and it's also kind of the same thing in the second story where he could give up their choice to stay together so that way he could set up his merchant store. And again, it's like, but he's already made his choice in the first story, so why is he doing this again?
Yeah, a lot of it does feel very, I don't like a very arc to arc, where sometimes it gets to the point where they do something in a town and then hit back on the road, and it's almost like nothing ever happened in a way. They just have like different goods in the cart.
It's very self-contained.
Yeah, which I feel like I liked a lot more. But watching it now, sometimes I kind of wish there was more of a like more of that connective tissue with like their previous actions, which again, it's an incomplete story in anime form. I actually own a lot of the light novels. I got them used at McKay's. So I own like the first 20 and I've not read them, but I want to. I read a little bit of the first one. I just never finished it.
Wow, and before they went crazy with their prices, so congrats to you.
Yeah, this was an era where I traded in a bunch of music CDs and had like a bunch of store credit, and they just happened to have like the whole series there almost. So I just bought like a bunch of them.
Nice.
But one day I will read them. But I watched this season, and this is my second time rewatching it. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, it's my second viewing of it. So I have not watched this since the first time I saw it. In fact, this actually might be the first time I'm actually using the physical one that I have to watch this, which the Blu-ray is great. It has the OVAs on it and everything too. But that's just something that I think about revisiting it is like, oh, I wonder like when this is going to come back up or when this is going to come back up. And then of course the anime doesn't have it. But, you know, if some of these characters like Chloe or Anime Original, now it's enticing me more to want to read from the beginning. I see a lot of posts where it's like, oh, where should I start reading Spice and Wolf if I've watched the show but want to keep going? And everyone's like, just start from the beginning because there's so many differences.
So, I think one aspect of the Spice and Wolf series that I really want to get into is the music. Because it is so good. Not just the opening and ending, but also just the instrumental background music that plays throughout the show. It definitely puts you in the mood for the setting that the show is taking place in.
Oh yeah. I love like when Lawrence realizes that something's going to go wrong and like the strings or anything gets a little bit more heightened, like it really carries the mood of the show, or even just like the light music that plays during like their banter. You know the one motif I'm talking about.
Yeah, the flute music.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely would need to get this music, and I think it would be really good, like tabletop D&D music.
Yeah. It's very like setting appropriate and just kind of guides you through the scenes. It's great. I also love the openings and endings for Spice and Wolf. Now, you had mentioned, I think before we were recording, that this is actually the first time you've watched season 2. That you had seen season 1 before, but haven't seen season 2. How did you feel about the season 2 openings and endings versus the season 1 openings and endings?
So I thought they were very similar in mood, because the openings for season 1 and season 2 are kind of somber ballads in a way, and then the endings are very kind of more upbeat jingles. I loved the opening for season 2. I thought it was very evocative.
Yeah.
It's not as memorable for me as season 1, but it's still pretty good. And if I have to be honest, I kind of skipped the ending for season 2.
Yeah, I think for me, season 1's opening and ending are some of my favorite openings and endings in anime. I think they're just like super iconic. I would constantly listen to them just on their own. People have made a lot of mashups with them that are hilarious. Season 2, I like the visuals for the openings, but the songs themselves I think are still good, just they're not as the ones I revisit as often. Like, I think it's the season 2 ending that has like the art that I think is like the art of like that they use for the light novels over like the different side characters. So even just rewatching, I'm like, oh yeah, there's that character that's going to show up later on. So I thought that was kind of cute.
I was more kind of wishing it was more like the cutesy piano jingle that's in first season, and it's the second season ending is more like a modern anime opening with vocal and sort of an electronic beat, at least in the beginning, which I
Yeah.
wasn't a fan of.
Yeah. Still good songs, but yeah. Almost kind of mirrors a little bit of the tone of the season 2, where I think season 1 is a lot more playful, and season 2 gets a little bit more, I guess we'll say emotional, just like in the terms of like theme and depth, not so much like anything else, but it kind of matches that.
No, but I think it's hard just to top that season 1 opening because it's such a pretty ballad with a really good vocal performance.
Oh yeah.
And I've heard so many remixes of that first opening. Like, there's been some beautiful piano renditions of the first opening for Spice and Wolf season 1 that I really love.
Oh yeah, I bet. It's a beautiful piece. Like, I still have it in like my regular like rotation of songs like from anime that I listen to.
Plus, for me, the visuals for the opening with the song really stuck with me. Like Holo alone in the winter snowy visual, or her at the table crying for a reason we don't understand,
Oh yeah.
really stuck with me.
Yeah, it's really good to kind of capture a lot of what I think she's feeling is those like feelings of isolation. Like, even in the show they talk about it, how she doesn't want Lawrence really to leave, and then she'll be all alone again. She's been alone for so long.
Yeah, that's kind of a character trait with her, whereas she kind of has this bravado up front, but internally she can be very vulnerable because of her feeling of isolation and her feeling of being kind of alone in this world and not wanting to be so separated.
Mm-hmm. I do really like the depth that Lawrence and Hollow have. That just them kind of together and experiencing that and communicating and growing together. I think it really kind of acts as a blueprint for a lot of other shows, and even just shows that are about like a journey or traveling. I know we mentioned Frieren earlier, but even just watching Frieren after rewatching this, and I was like just seeing kind of similarities and how it's kind of shaped a lot of other shows.
Yeah, because I know we've talked about it briefly, but Frieren kind of has a similar blueprint where it's a character that's lived a long time, and the show is not very action oriented or like we need to get to point A to point B. It's very much like you're on the journey. The journey is more important than the destination.
Yes, the destination is just kind of the motivating point of why they're going, but like definitely a very much a arc to arc episodic feel. It's a very cozy show.
Yeah, and like you were saying, I felt kind of nice going back to sort of like an episodic arc format because we live in such a continuity driven world thanks to a lot of Western stuff from Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And where it's just like, oh yeah, it's not you need to know episode 3 to know what's going on in episode 8. Like you could basically watch one arc of Spice and Wolf and just say you're done, and I would say you would have a very satisfying story.
Yeah, or even just if you want to rewatch it and just rewatch the arcs that you like the best, you can kind of pick it in the middle if you needed to. I think it could still work. Like, I could definitely understand why people for so long were wanting more of it, because I think the characters really reach a peak point towards the end, and just seeing kind of where that goes from there. It does like a really good job too, talking like it gives you like little hints and nuggets about like what the world is like and what's going on, like this northern expedition, or the like how the church is kind of spreading its influence over more of like traditional pagan traditions. But we really only get to see that through the lens of the traveling merchant, which I think really adds a uniqueness to it. Any modern show would have like a huge expedition dump episode to explain the world, but we get just enough to kind of get what's going through their eyes, and I really appreciate it for that.
Yeah, and I never feel like I'm getting an exposition dump on top over my head where they're just being like, okay, here's what's going on in the world right now, and I'm just going to just splur out all this information on the floor and you have to pick it up. I think the script does a really good job of delicately putting you through the world, of setting up like why the world is like it is and how the economics of the world work.
Right.
I never felt either overwhelmed or uh, intimidated by what was given to me as a viewer.
Yeah, it's very focused, I think, which I really like about it.
I guess as we're wrapping up, one thing I just remembered as we're recording is when the show initially came out, I think people were upset because a lot of the imagery was like the early episodes where Holo's naked.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, it's so funny to think about like that being such a big deal. Because I think if the show came out now, I don't know if people would be talking about that as much as they did back in 2008.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it didn't even faze me at all. And even when I first watched it, probably closer to like 2014 or 2015 or so. And even then, it didn't really faze me. I was just like, okay. Like, it's done more tastefully. Like, it's not super explicit or anything.
No, I never felt like it's for fan service sake of here's Holo showing off her body for you, the voyeuristic viewer. It's just
right.
like, no, that's just how she is at this moment.
The fan service is really when you have more of their banter and discussion. That's really the fan service, when they can be playful with each other.
Right. I think we're wrapping up our thoughts on Spice and Wolf. So, Will, do you have any sort of final thoughts you would like to leave our listeners?
Yeah, so as rewatching this show, for years, this has always been like a top favorite anime of mine. And I think a lot of it is because there aren't really a lot of shows that really hit the specific things that Spice and Wolf does. It is a great comfort show. It's about a great journey. It's not in your face with any sort of overcomplicated lore or setting. You know exactly where they're going. And it also has a thing or two it teaches you about economics, which sounds funny to say out loud, but honestly, it has a lot of things that kind of mirror how like basic economics work in the real world. And I think for that uniqueness of, you know, it could have been an economic show or it could have been like a journey show, but it kind of blends it together. And I think the dichotomy of it really makes it unique and entertaining. And I don't really think it falters in both aspects at the same time. Sure, there might be some of the economic side that might be a little bit less engaging, like the kind of the rushed like scheme at the end of season 2. But I still think it's a great show to revisit, and you can really see a lot of how other like journey-esque type arc-based shows kind of get a lot from Spice and Wolf. The character depth really, like the growth rather of them going through, is really something that is unmatched in a lot of shows.
Yeah, I think you can see the legacy of Spice and Wolf in its story format and its character dynamics in shows like Apothecary Diaries to a certain extent. And like you've said with Frieren Beyond Journey's End. And so I think what makes the show so strong in my mind is the music and setting and the very strong character back and forth and dynamics between Holo and Lawrence. And I think it just goes to show, if you have characters with very definitive points of view and personalities, that's all you really need. You don't need things to be so action-oriented, because just their dialogue and their point of view can be just as entertaining as an elaborate action sequence.
Right. I think the next time I rewatch this show, I've got to finally give the sub a watch.
Yeah, it is. I'm also primarily a sub watcher, but I think it goes to show that if a dub is done really well, it can really stick in people's minds because they keep bringing back J. Michael Tatum and Brina Palencia to voice these characters, so it must have made a great impression on people.
Oh yeah, anything that them two are going to be in, I want to watch.
Right. So, to wrap things up, as of this recording, you can find Spice and Wolf, the original series, on streaming, and you can buy it on different digital platforms. Unfortunately, for me, and for maybe you, listener, the physical Blu-ray of both the seasons and the OVAs are out of print currently. I'm hoping that it's another one of those, well, we have to put the Crunchyroll label and everything now moves. But it could also be the licensors being like, no, take it away because we want people to focus on the new show. Because that's a recurring thing that doesn't make any sense to me, where the old show is taking away the attention of the new show, so we need to make sure the old show goes away.
That's so disappointing.
I don't understand that mentality because my thinking is the new show will get people to go back to check out the old show, which means that's a new bump for your old show and in profits. Why would you want to kill a second wind? I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't quite get it either, but that is really disheartening to hear that it's going to be less accessible physically for the original show, but thankfully it is available to watch streaming. You said it was on Crunchyroll?
Yeah, it's on Crunchyroll and different ad-free streaming services like Freevee and Tubi. So
got it.
You check it out
definitely
there.
recommend for anyone who hasn't seen it, who wants to give it a try, even before watching the new one, or even just watching the new one, because I think it's still airing right now, the new season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as of this recording, the new reboot of Spice and Wolf is currently airing.
I wonder how much longer that will go. I kind of hope that it will adapt more than these did, just to be able to see more of that story animated. But I think whatever they do, it'll be a good time.
I hope they adapt more than the original series and go into different territories that they didn't explore with the later novels. But we will see as the show progresses. So, as podcasts like to do, Will, do you have anything you would like to promote or people to check out on social media?
Sure. So if you would like to follow me, you can find me at swooshxbear on Twitter and also on Blue Sky. So I get both realms of the blue-based social media apps. But you can also primarily find me on my YouTube channel, also at swooshxbear, where I cover retro game video games. So anything from like Super Nintendo era up to like modern, I'm probably covering it. I'm currently working on a video talking about the X-Men games for the Sega Genesis. So hopefully by the time that this episode is out, you could go and watch that video, is my goal.
Nice.
So yeah.
Yeah, you make really fun video game content on YouTube. I recommend it.
Thanks.
Yeah. And if you want to follow me for some reason, you can find me also on the different blue planets of social media at WBForeman999, where I'm usually tweeting about Lupin stuff and other anime things. You can also find us in our Discord, Third Impact Anime Discord. That's usually on all our socials. It's a pretty active Discord community, and it's pretty fun. If you're struggling to keep up with news, usually I'm the newsman in the Discord, posting stuff about video games and movies.
I think Bill is the reason I found out that the season 3 of Spice and Wolf got announced, I want to say. Because of because of the Discord, so very important.
Yes. And then you can go back and check all our other episodes on your podcast feed of choice. So, thanks for checking us out, and I hope you had a good time listening to us talk about a great show that is Spice and Wolf. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Until next time, we will see you in the next one.